the night the message went out. June 6, 1944. 2:58 a.m., London. The blackout curtains leak no light, the city's heartbeat muffled under sandbags and sirens that haven't quite found their voice. In a nondescript upstairs room, valves glow dull orange in a steel chassis. Warm dust. Hot bakelite. A tremor of carrier wave climbing the walls. You are so close you can hear the soft tick of the key as Juan Pujol García, codename Garbo, leans over the wireless set, sleeves rolled, fingertips poised like a pianist above a telegram of lies that will hold an army in place. Across from him, Tomas Harris, MI5 case officer, ink-smudged cuffs, hair slicked back as if he's going somewhere grand and not just the shabby center of the greatest deception on earth, studies the translucent onion skin draft under a green-shaded lamp. Again, Harris murmurs and taps a pencil. The draft is dense with abbreviations and timings, the kind of detail the Abwehr craves like sugar, convoy counts, regiment numbers, weather at Boulogne, lights seen on the channel, all fed by subagents who don't exist. The key clicks. Dits and das stutter into the ether. Pujol's jaw tightens. He imagines the path of the current, London to Madrid, from Madrid to Berlin, and then outward to listening posts stretched along the coast of occupied France, to officers of the German 15th Army who are awake and rubbing tired eyes over coffee gone cold. He imagines their field telephones ringing. He imagines them believing. On the table, a chipped mug, a brass ashtray heavy with other people's nerves, a wind-up clock that refuses to be hurried. Harris lowers himself into the battered chair, shoulder holster creaking under his jacket. "You're certain about the phrasing?" he asks without looking up, in Spanish first, then crisp English for the stenographer huddled in the corner. The stenographer notes code groups in tidy columns. A secondary record, belt and suspenders, because nothing in this room is allowed to fail. Pujol nods, the shadow of a smile moving beneath his thin mustache. His Abwehr controllers call him Arabelle. They think he is their man inside England, a Spaniard whose invented moral fervor burns against Bolshevism and British arrogance alike. They have sent him money, praise, and, not long ago, a small medal for reliable service. Tonight he will be more reliable than ever. He works the message like a craftsman planing a board. From Agent 4 in Glasgow, he dictates in a low voice, confirmation of increased traffic of tank transporters moving south by night along the A74. From Agent 7, the shipping clerk at Tilbury, note, heavy lift cranes reserved, schedules altered without notice. From the Venezuelan student, no, right, the South American, embedded with small boat crews at Dover, camouflage nets removed, men briefed to expect short crossings under heavy escort. He inventories phantoms with the calm of a bookkeeper. Each subagent has a backstory, a handwriting sample, an envelope of prior reports. Each one breathes because Pujol and Harris have spent months teaching them to breathe. The radio's tuning capacitor whines as the operator, Miss B, fine-tunes the frequency. She checks the crystal, checks the aerial run to the attic, checks the tiny code pad issued by Berlin to their golden source in England. The lamp hums. Rain slicks the sill, and somewhere far below, a milk cart rattles the sleeping street. Time marks, Harris says. We must be exact. Exact, Pujol repeats. He is careful with time. He is careful with everything. From an army of secrets, he has assembled one truth the Germans will swallow whole. The Allies are not coming to Normandy to stay. What is arriving in the shallows, even now, the first signals say, even now with parachutes ghosting over orchards in the dark, is merely the feint. The hammer blow waits across the channel opposite Calais, the first U.S. Army group, Patton's Fist, the phantom host of Fortitude South. He never says fortitude. He never says phantom. He speaks of fuel depots in Kent counted by a subagent in the Women's Voluntary Service, Agent 15, of engineers at Folkestone arguing about Bailey Bridge tolerances over ale, Agent 9, of a garrulous warrant officer from an American Armored Division, Agent 12, who can't keep his cigarette ash or his mouth under control. He speaks the language of the Abwehr's appetite, petty, plausible detail. And German coastal guns at Cap Gris-Nez should expect a bombardment window between H-hour +48 to +72, He concludes, suggesting retention of primary reserves in Pas de Calais for decisive counterstroke. Harris looks up, eyes narrowed in approval. That will sing in Berlin, he says. Miss B raises a hand. Ready for final groups. The room stills. Pujol takes a breath like a diver. The next line will be the spine of the lie that saves the truth. Add, he says, and there is a small gravity in the word. Our sources report that current landings in Normandy aim to draw off local defenses and fix Allied command of the air and sea before the main operation begins. Primary assault remains against Pas de Calais. Hold your best. The key spits it into the dark. Harris watches the meter's needle shiver. Even you can feel the vibration, a phantom brush along the skin, as if a tuning fork had been struck somewhere in your chest. Pujol closes his eyes. He sees not London now, but a map pinned across occupied Europe, blue thread to Dover, red pins at Boulogne and Calais, a string of small black flags westward marking divisions, 116th Panzer, 711th Infantry, 346th, that will be told, because of him, to wait. He sees the beaches whose names he has not been given, only code letters, briefed in whispers in rooms like this one, and he imagines the silhouettes of landing craft shouldering dawn aside, men pressed against steel as the ramps rattle and drop. Outside, the rain strengthens. Somewhere, an ambulance bell's past. Upstairs, the house settles its bones. Pujol removes his spectacles and rubs the bridge of his nose. We have crossed, he says softly, and he is not talking about the channel. Now we must hold them. Harris slips the draft into a file stamped with an indifferent number and an inked line, B1A. He rises, stretching, revolver thumping once against his ribs. They'll ask for more proof, he says. They always do. We'll give it to them at dawn. Reports from the estuary, motor traffic counts, a rumor that Patton cursed a railway clerk. You know. A smile. The good stuff. The set's carrier fades. Miss B checks her watch. Transmission complete, she says, and in that instant the room seems to exhale, the way a church does when the final prayer has been said and footsteps begin to turn for the door. Pujol opens the window a thumb's width. Wet air moves in, cool and ordinary. Down there, London breathes. Out there, France holds its breath. On this side of the channel, a Spaniard in a borrowed war has placed a hand on the scale. On the other side, men he will never meet will live because of a story told just well enough. He closes the latch. The clock ticks. The rain drills the sill. And at 3:07 a.m., in an office whose walls he will never see, a German duty officer reaches for a ringing telephone. The making of Garbo. March 1941. Lisbon, Portugal. A humid dawn seeps into the port, silvering the moored trawlers and the tin roofs along Rua de Junqueira. In a hotel that smells of cheap soap and salt water, a former chicken farmer from Barcelona stares at his reflection in a streaked mirror and practices his new life. His name is Juan Pujol García, but today, depending on who asks, he might be Juan García, neutral Spanish businessman, or Hans Müller, a disillusioned German sympathizer. He doesn't yet have the codename Garbo. He hasn't yet met MI5. What he does have is a conviction. Hitler is evil, and someone has to lie to him. His wife, Araceli, sits cross-legged on the bed, flipping through a wrinkled passport. You will get yourself killed, she says in Spanish. And for what? They don't even want you. She's not wrong. The British embassy had turned him away twice, some Spaniard claiming he wanted to spy for them but refusing to name a sponsor. We have no use for amateurs, they told him. So Pujol had done what any determined amateur might. He decided to spy for Hitler instead. By noon he's in a cafe across from the German consulate, sweating through his jacket as he spins his story to an Abwehr attaché. I am a patriot, he insists, lowering his voice, a Spaniard who admires the Führer's discipline. I have friends in London. I can report on the British war effort if given resources. The officer narrows his eyes. Another crank, another dreamer. But Pujol's earnestness is disarming. Within weeks, he's issued invisible ink, a cipher pad, and an assignment: establish an espionage network inside Britain. It's a perfect absurdity. Pujol has never been to England. From a boarding house in Lisbon, he writes his first report to Berlin, pages of neat script describing ship movements in Liverpool, anti-aircraft defenses around Glasgow, and the mood of British civilians. All of it fabricated from newspapers, radio bulletins, and tourist guides. He invents agents by the dozen: a Venezuelan student in Scotland, a Welsh seaman in the docks, a disgruntled civil servant in the War Office. He gives them personalities, debts, hobbies, even quarrels. He sends his German handlers tickets clipped from English newspapers as proof. The Abwehr is delighted. "Excellent initiative," one telegram replies. "Continue operations." So begins the legend of Arabelle, the code name Berlin bestows upon him. By 1942, his reports are circulated among Wehrmacht planners as reliable intelligence. The British are so confused by the German enthusiasm for false data that they begin tracing it backward. And one rainy morning in Madrid, an MI6 officer named Cyril Mills knocks on a door with a proposition. In London, Thomas Harris will later call that moment the collision of imagination and necessity. Britain had long sought a counterspy who could feed the Germans just enough truth to remain credible, without jeopardizing Allied secrets. When Pujol arrived, still clutching his coded notebooks and a face full of nervous conviction, he was exactly what the deception planners needed. At MI5's Section B1A, Harris tested him with questions: the rank structure of the Home Guard, the speed of a Wellington bomber, the tide schedules at Dover. Pujol didn't always know, but he studied, scribbling pages of notes until he did. What impressed Harris wasn't the knowledge, it was the invention. He didn't simply tell lies, Harris later wrote. He built worlds. They called him Garbo, after Greta Garbo, the actress who could be anyone and make you believe it. By 1943, his network, still entirely imaginary, had expanded to 27 agents. Each had a backstory thick enough to fool cross-checking. MI5 kept dossiers for all of them, complete with handwriting samples and expense claims. When Berlin sent money to pay the network, the British used it to fund the deception's next layer. Garbo became the puppet master of an army of ghosts. His relationship with the Germans was theater performed in code. Each transmission had to walk the knife's edge between plausible and absurd. Too much accuracy risked giving away Allied secrets. Too much fantasy might expose him. So he wove truth and illusion together like a tapestry. He would mention a real convoy, but misstate its destination. He would reference an actual regiment, but move it 50 miles. Every deception was anchored in a kernel of fact. As his credibility grew, so did his reach. By late 1943, Abwehr headquarters in Madrid began routing Garbo's messages directly to Berlin. He became one of the Reich's most valued informants in Britain, second only to their agents in Switzerland. When the Allies began drafting Operation Bodyguard, the grand deception to protect the D-Day landings, Garbo was its keystone. One evening, Harris brought him to a small safe house in Hendon, North London. There, surrounded by maps and photographs, Pujol studied the Normandy coast. "They must believe it is Calais," Harris said, tapping a finger against the Pas-de-Calais sector. "That is the shortest route. The obvious route. We must make it too obvious to ignore." Garbo nodded slowly. "Then we give them what they want to believe." And so, the plan, a fictitious First U.S. Army group under General George S. Patton, supposedly amassing across southeast England. Inflatable tanks would sprout in Kent fields. Dummy landing craft would bob in the Thames estuary. Fake radio chatter would hum with traffic reports. And Garbo's agents, his chorus of ghosts, would confirm it all to Berlin. By the time Allied forces were boarding ships for Normandy, Pujol had transmitted over 500 messages, each one radiating credibility. The Abwehr called his information beyond reproach. They placed him in direct contact with high command. Even Himmler's office received his reports. And still he was calm. Every word he tapped out was a weapon aimed at Germany's blind spot. Every sentence was a shield from men about to step into the sea. As June approached, his task would become impossibly delicate. He would have to tell the Germans the truth, that the invasion had begun, and still persuade them that it was a feint. It would be the greatest performance of his life. The Lie That Shaped D-Day. June 5, 1944. 22:30 hours. London. The air smells of ozone and tobacco. In the narrow operations room at MI5 Section B1A, the lamps burn through blackout paper, their cones of light falling over a map pinned with hundreds of colored flags. Blue for Allied units, red for German divisions, green for the Phantoms. The green outweighs the rest. Tomas Harris leans against the map table, collar loosened, his cigarette leaving a thin vertical plume in the still air. "They've launched," he says quietly. "Operation Neptune is underway. Our boys are in the water." Juan Pujol García, Garbo, sits at the end of the room beside the wireless set. He's pale but steady. On the table before him lies a blank message sheet and a small pad of cipher numbers. To anyone else, it's paper and code. To Garbo, it's destiny. In a few minutes, the greatest amphibious invasion in human history will collide with his greatest illusion. 4 months he has fed Berlin a steady diet of half-truths, fuel depots around Dover, troop movements through Kent, a massive American buildup under General Patton waiting to strike the pot of Calais. The Germans have swallowed every bite. The 15th Army, their best-equipped reserve, stands ready at Calais, far from the real invasion beaches. Now, in the dark waters off Normandy, the first landing craft grind toward the shore. And Garbo must convince Hitler to do nothing. Across the channel, in a concrete bunker near Boulogne, Abwehr officers study his reports. Their teletype rattles. Berlin demands confirmation. Is this the real invasion? But the messages are conflicting. Normandy? Too narrow. Too far from German air support. Surely this is a diversion. Surely Patton's real blow will come at Calais. At 3:30 a.m., the first coded signals of D-Day reach London. Parachute drops confirmed in Normandy. Gliders down near Cannes. Allied bombers striking coastal batteries. The radio operator beside Garbo looks up. "It's begun," she says. Garbo doesn't move. He folds his hands, breathes slowly, and waits for Harris's nod. "Send it," Harris says. He bends over the key. His message to Berlin begins with apology. He explains that one of his sub-agents, Agent 6, a sailor in Portsmouth, had alerted him hours earlier that an invasion was imminent. But radio conditions were poor. Transmission was impossible. He could only report now, after the landings had begun. The irony is surgical. Garbo tells the Germans the truth, but just late enough to make himself appear honest, blameless, loyal. It's the single most dangerous message he's ever sent. In Berlin, the report lands like a stone dropped in a still pond. The Abwehr praises his effort. His credibility soars. The message is relayed to the German High Command, and from there to the Führer's headquarters in East Prussia. Adolf Hitler reads the report with satisfaction. Normandy, he concludes, is the decoy. The main attack will come at Calais once the Allies have drawn German armor west. "Hold the 15th Army," he orders. "Do not move them." Those words, 6 syllables of hesitation, become the hinge upon which the invasion turns. Meanwhile, on the beaches of Normandy, chaos reigns. Dawn breaks gray and low over the surf. The sand at Omaha is red with blood and churned earth. Medics shout for stretchers. The air smells of cordite, diesel, and salt. From the cliffs above, German gunners pour fire into the surf, their machine guns sweeping the tide. Yet no reinforcements come. The armored divisions that could crush the beachhead remain idle near Calais, waiting for the phantom army Garbo has promised them. In the following days, his radio hums with disbelief from Berlin. Why no sign of Patton's army? Why do the Allies keep reinforcing Normandy if it's only a feint? Garbo answers with calm authority. The Supreme Allied Commander has always planned the real blow at Calais. These landings in Normandy are but the first step to divert your reserves. He even warns them not to overreact. Be patient. The real assault is imminent. The Abwehr agrees. For 7 weeks, Hitler's forces remain frozen, convinced the hammer has not yet fallen. Garbo's messages multiply, each one a masterstroke of invention. He fabricates agents reporting Allied hesitation, storm damage, fuel shortages, all to explain the delay of the main invasion. When Berlin asks for details about Patton's non-existent headquarters, He provides them location near Canterbury, security tighter than Buckingham Palace, constant troop movement. At one point, the Germans become so confident in his network that they award him the Iron Cross. The medal arrives through diplomatic channels, accompanied by a letter of gratitude from the Abwehr for distinguished service to the Reich. When Harris hands him the medal, Garbo holds it up to the light, unreadable. For lying better than any of them ever told the truth, he murmurs. Then he sets it down and goes back to work. By late July, the Allies have broken out of Normandy. Patton's real Third Army, flesh and steel this time, not ghosts, races across France. Only then do the Germans begin to grasp the depth of the deception. But it's too late. The bridges are burning, the tanks are rolling east, and the war's outcome is sealed. Garbo doesn't celebrate. He never does. To him, victory is measured in lives uncounted, men who survived because an enemy hesitated to believe their eyes. When Harris brings him a telegram from Eisenhower's staff thanking him for his service, Garbo simply nods. "We only told them what they wanted to hear," he says. That was always their weakness. He turns back to the wireless, to the quiet hiss of static filling the room like distant surf, and for a long moment says nothing. Then he reaches out, flicks the switch, and the signal dies. The war of lies is over. Years later, the files of Operation Fortitude would describe him in one line. Agent Garbo, primary asset in deception operations, success beyond estimation. But the truth of him was smaller, quieter, a Spaniard with no army, no gun, no uniform, who fought his war with patience and imagination, and won.